Hello, everyone. We're going to talk about Henri Matisse today. This is part one. Get to my screen share. So Matisse, it's like our other four: Monet, Cezanne, Van Gogh, Picasso. They had this intense love of painting. And no matter what, no matter their financial circumstances, their life outside of painting, they were going to continue to paint no matter what. And two things that Matisse gave us, I want to say that are very notable is his use of color and his simplicity. And then as far as other kind of more technical items like form and composition, perspective, etc., that revolution in that sense of what's true to a good painting that kind of came from Cezanne, or let's say did come from Cezanne, not kind of, but Matisse carried those forward in a wonderful way. And this was a comment I read about one poet talking about another. He said it's he's delving into a grace that's not yet been discovered. And I want to say with Matisse, that's what we got going on. He's in search of a grace not yet discovered, and I believe he found some of it. A quote from Matisse: "Painting from our elders was not adequate to the true representations of our sensations, so we had to seek new methods. After all, this urge is felt by every generation." So a couple of things here. Think about it. You want to be an artist, and so you start painting, and it's so like, well, who am I going to paint like? I'm going to paint like Rembrandt or Da Vinci or somebody that's modern in the day that you're alive, and you want to paint as well as they do. So with Matisse, it would have been the Impressionist painters and those that preceded them, like the Renaissance. That's who he wants to paint like. But being young and eager, etc., and energetic, you want to make it better than what they did, and you also want to know um, that you're in, you're every artist reflects the time that they're living in. And so it's got to be in sync with what's going on around you. What was going on around Matisse is not the same thing that was going on about Rembrandt, and that's got to be reflected somehow in his paintings. And Matisse was able to do that in a great way. So Matisse was born 1869, northern France, outside of northeast of Paris. His father was wealthy, was a grain merchant businessman. And again, like Cezanne, he wanted his son to follow him in business. So Matisse tries law school for 2 years and says, nope, age 20, I want to be a painter. He had a relationship with a woman named Caroline Jablot, and Jablat, and they had a daughter, Marguerite, and the relationship didn't last, and he ended up marrying a woman named Amelie. They were married 39 years before they divorced. They had two sons, Jean and Pierre, and then Margaret came to live with them. So, a family of five. And here's a picture of Henri and Amelie at having sharing a meal at the dinner table. And so, Matisse starts painting like everybody else. He's learning to paint, and he runs into a fellow named John Russell. And John Russell knew Van Gogh, and I believe he had met Van Gogh in that Corman Atelier that we talked about with Van Gogh, where Lautrec and Emile Bernard were also in there, and Gauguin. And anyway, Russell was from Australia and had come to Paris to seek fame and fortune as an artist. This is an example of one of his paintings on the right. So you would say that, it's very impressionistic, but it's also, approaches abstract. So my point being, Russell was, he wasn't your standard classically painting type of guy, but he told Matisse, he said, you got to see Van Gogh here. The way Van Gogh, the energy of his paintings is phenomenal, and there's a lot of great color in there. And I think that's something that would be, very suitable to a man of your character and sensibilities. And again, so Matisse sees Van Gogh work, it hits him right between the eyes, and here we go. Matisse, very diligent worker, very serious student. He said in one of his essays that he went to art class every morning for 10 years, and he would go to the Louvre every afternoon, for a 10-year period. And remember, Cezanne said of the Louvre, it's the book from which we learn to read. And I think it's interesting to think about that, you go to art school, Art Students League here in Denver, let's say, and you have wonderful classmates around you. Everybody's kind of, we're working on the same concept today. The teacher said, draw this chair, draw this light and shadow on this molly, all these basic kind of fundamentals of painting, which are essential, whether you're painting, crazy abstract or very traditional. You got to know those fundamentals. But here in the art class, you're being instructed, you're being told what to do, and it's kind of like there's an objective, and here we go. Let's see if you can, reach the goalpost. But then you go to the Louvre and you're there all by yourself, and you're looking at a Rembrandt, or you're looking at a Caravaggio, or today I'm at the museum and I'm looking at a Matisse. Well, then it's my turn to figure out what I want to teach myself, what goal I want to achieve. And it's like, it's where you find your voice. And, both are essential. But, I admire that Matisse said for 10 years, I studied like nobody's business, basically. So where Matisse starts to separate himself from the pack is they call it the Fauvist period. And Fauvism, a Fauvist is a wild beast, it translates in French. And Matisse, Andre Derain, and another fellow, Maurice Flamel, I call them the Three Musketeers of Fauvism. They spent their time in a little town in southern France, near the border of Spain, there on the western edge of France. It's called Collier, a little fishing village. And one of them had been there on the summers, and I think it was Matisse, but they knew each other in Paris, and one said to the other two, it's like, this place is unbelievable as far as the light goes. A typical shadow is going to be kind of dark and cool. He said the shadows down here, the light is so wonderful that the shadows even have these brilliant, magical, lively colors to them. We must go there and paint. So they spent 3-4 years down there focusing on painting landscapes outside mainly. And this is a classic painting from Matisse, the colorful window at Collier that he painted in 1905 during that period. And there's it's almost not a fair comparison. This black and white image of Collier, the sky would be a wonderful blue and the sea would be a wonderful greenish blue. And, this room, it could be a beautiful red or blue, but anyway, that, just shows the decorative power, that the imagination. I want to say more of Matisse here on the left, don't paint so much what you see, but paint what you feel. And then along this same time, I've got 3 or 4 significant paintings that came from Matisse during this Fauvist period of time. And these are not your kind of your Fauvist paintings. This was stuff he would have been doing in Paris in his studio. But this one is the Bonheur de Vivre, or Vivra. Sorry about my French, but basically the Happy Life, painted in 1905. Woman with a Hat, painted in 1905 also. And Gertrude Stein, who we talked about, with the Picasso that ran the salon. She was the #1 kind of madame, so the avant-garde. And if she liked your work, it probably meant that some, commercial success was just around the corner. And she bought this painting from Matisse. So that was like, a feather in his hat. And the story on this painting too is that somebody came up to Matisse and he said, I've never seen a woman's portrait, portrayed that way with those colors. And, it doesn't look like a typical portrait. And he said, Monsieur, that is not a portrait, it is a painting. So I like to think of that terms of Matisse, that, we're getting away from this realism sense, and Matisse is just taking it. He's another one of our artists that's taken it to the next level. And here in 1907 is Blue Nude. And again, during this time period, and, there's a twisted, distorted figure. And we'll talk about that later on how these paintings influenced, especially Picasso. 1910. So he's been at it for 20 years painting, I guess. And, he's recognized as a great painter among his peers in Paris. And the art market is starting to go around the world a little bit. So we have this Russian collector named Sergei Shukin. There's collectors from Copenhagen, from all over Germany. Other places in Europe are starting to pick up on this modern art of Picasso, Matisse, etc. And Serge, he ends up buying, I think he was, Picasso's number one collector, but bought Cézanne's, bought Monet's, bought Van Gogh's. But he had a particular fondness for Matisse and commissioned Matisse to paint this painting here that it's entitled The Dance. And also commissioned him to paint the painting, it's called Music. And there was a third painting, I forget the story on that. But anyway, it took a while for this all to kind of come together. But as soon as Schuken got a hold of Matisse, things started looking up as far as Matisse and his financial life. And this is Red Studio, painted 1910, 1911. And we'll talk about that later, why it's significant. And there that painting is in scale. And, Matisse, this cutting edge, this avant-garde, this, trying to do things my way in a different way than is done before. It was not without these, these speed bumps along the way. And I've talked before about the 1913 Armory Show, where a lot of this modern art from Europe and the five artists that we've been talking about, for the first time, their art was seen in mass at an exhibit at an armory building in New York City in 1913. And it was well attended. I think that the attendance while it was in New York was like almost 500,000 people. And you extrapolate that for what the population is of New York and the surrounding area and the ease of transportation to what that many people would come to see, today. It outranks any exhibit that has ever been done at the Museum of Modern Art, even their Picasso exhibit where they cleared the whole museum, or their Impressionist exhibit. I think there was a Michelangelo exhibit. These big name artists to come. It's like this 1913 Armory Show had that kind of attendance. And the show first went to New York, then went to Chicago, and then went to Boston. And in Chicago, there was a lot of controversy, and somebody mocked up a couple of Matisse paintings, and they took them outside and burned them. And the headlines in the next day in the newspaper was "Students Burning Futurist Art and Celebrating Cuba's Departure." So because Matisse, it's not easy when you're trying to do something new. That Clement Greenberg, all new art is ugly at first. But and it was Woman with the Hat and Blue Nude, supposedly, or two of the paintings they mocked up. Somebody said they did three. I'm not the third, but mocked them up and burned them. So I don't know what Matisse thought, but it couldn't have been just the most pleasant of experiences. And here's two kind of out there paintings, 1914. Let's see. So he's 44 years old. But this is Window at Collier, version 2 here on the left. And this is a view of Notre Dame, another through a window, and very abstract work. So again, Matisse, he tried a lot of things, and he was most successful at everything he tried. And here's version 1 of Window at Collier and window 2. And I'd seen this Matisse painting before, the version 2, and I had no idea what it was. And then I saw the title, and it's like, oh wow, that must have, he was really experimenting, I guess, relative to what was in at the time. And then we'll talk about in this part 2, when we talk about his techniques, and his paintings went way flat. And this is a continuation of a lot of things that Cézanne gave to us, and Picasso picked up on, and Matisse picked up on as well. And is it effective? And I will try to say that yes, that taking the forms out of the three-dimensionality, removing the perspective is it enhanced the experience of seeing. It's the conversation. And then Matisse visited the United States a couple of times, and I'm not sure of all the circumstances, but in one visit he met Alfred Barnes. I believe Alfred's the first name, but the Barnes collection in Philadelphia, an incredible collection of Impressionist art. All the artists we've talked about are in there. An amazing collection. But he commissions Matisse to paint these murals above in the one of the main rooms. And if you'll notice these doors on the left, a door is typically, I think, 7 feet tall, maybe 7.5, but look how massive these murals are. And also the story is Matisse, measured, I think while he was there, had somebody measure. He goes back to France to work on these. And when he sent them back over completed works, they didn't fit. He was off a couple of inches here and there, and so he had to do them over. And one thing Matisse talked about while he was making these, that there was a letter that what was wild was like these glass windows here that look to the beautiful outdoors. He was in competition with them, and he was also like, you're standing down here, you're looking up there, and you've got this competition here. He took all that into mind while he constructed these murals. So it's like, what's the visual experience going to be? Well, I'll just paint these dancers. Like, well, no, there's some other competition going on. I need to make sure they're in sync, or they're not out competed by some of these other factors that are going on. So Matisse, I said he and Amelie divorced after 39 years of marriage, and the woman in his life the last 20 years, he was 65, she was 25. Was Lydia Delextorkaya, and it said he sketched her the day before he passed away. And there's Lydia on the left, and one of his more modern renditions of a portrait of her on the right. And then, so he's in his early 70s, and he has a cancer, like a stomach cancer, a colon cancer, and he can't stand up for long periods of time. So he spends a lot of time horizontal in the bed. And he gets his assistants, could have been Lydia and others, but they'll saturate a piece of paper with the color that he picks out, and then he gets in bed with these scissors, and he just freehands cuts these forms out, and then pastes them to the wall. And it's just like he kept working, no matter what, till the end of his life. And these are very interesting pieces of art. This is called a snail. And I believe this was like in 1952 or 53. It's 10 feet by 10 feet. And, very simple, but, very effective. And, the simplicity, I'll talk about that in part 2. That's a gift that Matisse gave us. But, think about the dance, and, it's a kind of the foreground, background, and figures on top of it. But here's the dance cut to its essence. Blue Nude, same thing, cut to its essence. And then, it's uncanny. Sometimes you can pick up studying an artist that there's a clairvoyance about it, that they're seeing things that their fellow human being is going to be eager to be in touch with, a few years hence. And so Matisse passes away in 1954. But I want to say we're just getting ready to get into the explosion of advertising and these images in our face everywhere, a simple image that has so much behind it in some ways, and not all of it's of substance, but this simplicity that Matisse brought us, that we'll talk about in part 2. I just want to say maybe he had a feeling that was getting ready to come, or that was going to be a part of our zeitgeist, part of our society's kind of energy. So cutouts in scale. And later in his life, too, the last years of his life, Matisse, he designed a chapel in Vence, a little village not too far from Nice. And he had put an advertisement when he first became very ill, and for a nurse. And this woman showed up, Monique Bourgeois, and she had wanted to be a nun. She was kind of in transition, but she ended up spending 2 years with Matisse, helping him recover. And I think, Matisse had one operation, then there was an infection, and then, it went from bad to worse, but then stabilized for 10 years, I guess, and he lived with it. But she went off to become a Dominican nun. And at the convent nearby, they were going to build a new chapel. And she, asked Matisse if he would help design. And he spent four diligent years designing that chapel, thanks to her. And son Pierre, so born in 1890, passed away in 1989, lived for 99 years, comes to New York in 1931 to open a gallery, not just for his father's work, but to represent the modern art of the era, which most of it was coming from Europe at the time. So, Pierre had this sensibility like his dad on what a good piece of art was. Maybe it wasn't accepted by the public yet, but Pierre had that that sensibility himself. And during World War II, a lot of the artists of the day, for obvious reasons, had to leave Germany, had to leave France, had to leave Poland, etc., and they come to the United States, and to see if they could make it here. And Pierre was integral in supporting these artists coming over here. And this is a flyer from one of the fundraisers. He had artists in exile to raise money to help them get established in the United States. And wife Amelie and daughter Marguerite during World War II, they both worked for the French underground resistance, and both were arrested. And Amelie, I believe, spent 6 years somewhere behind bars, and Marguerite was arrested, and then she was put on a train to be sent to some prison camp. And luckily, there was some bombing, and anyway, everybody on the train escaped, and she was one of them. So she didn't spend too long in incarceration, but just showing the grit and the guts of the family there. And here's some pictures of that chapel here later in his life that he worked for 4 years on. And just notice how this light reflects on the floor. And, it wasn't by accident that this is happening. So it's kind of like, his 50, 60 years of painting, and his time with colors and shapes and everything, he's given it to a good cause. And also, so it's late 1940s, early 1950s, and modern art is starting to take off with some of the hoity-toities to the United States. The Rockefellers, they commissioned Matisse along with Chagall, and I'm not sure, this looks more like Chagall than Matisse here, but this is a church that's in rural New York, upstate New York, somewhere near where the Rockefellers own property. And I've never been there. It'd probably be fun to go see that. And then also the people of Time Life, Henry Luce and the Time Life people, they commissioned Matisse to do some stained glass at the Time Life building. And there were other commissions that he did, and he illustrated books, etc. But here's the great master at work, working on some of those large, perhaps barns or I don't know. That's got to be the Venice Chapel because look at his age, that he's working on drawings, trying to figure out. That would be a Barnes workup that he's got going on. That would be a Barnes workup he's got going on. Takes a lot of work to do something like that, especially if you're going to make it good. And then self-portrait here. So let's look at some of his early paintings. Like I said, you're an artist, you want to learn to paint, you try to paint like what's already been painted. So, kind of the popular painting of the day would be the Impressionists. And, these are not very good images. They're blurred. I couldn't find any way to get them other than how I've obtained them here. But, nothing special here, the great works, but, there's nothing really unique or interesting in that kind of vein. I like this one. It's got a little bit of something going on there. But the Fauve period, so that's where he starts to separate himself. And the way you would describe it, it's a heightened juxtaposition of colors. And one critic, though, he said, they're great, but this is probably what I'd want to decorate the wall of a nursery for my young child. So, not everything was roses. So here's a couple of the paintings from the Fauve era that I like a lot. This painting's interesting here. It's I've looked at this for many, many years, and I carry around a file of paintings that I always look at when I want to kind of pick up my spirits, and this is one of them. And it was only recently that I found out the title of it, and I could never find it anywhere looking for Matisse. And then there was an exhibit this summer in Houston at the Museum of Fine Arts there, and it's the first painting you see when you walk into the exhibit. And then the owner is the Hobby family, and in Houston, one of the airports is the Hobby Airport. So it's in a private collection of the Hobbies, and they probably never let it travel. And since it was in their hometown, it was on display, and it's quite an experience to get to see it after looking at it for so long. But these are all these scenes from Collier, the small fishing town there in Western France on the Mediterranean. And then the Three Musketeers would be Andre Derain, Henri Matisse, and Maurice Flammec, and just showing a few comparisons of, this is this fortress that's there in Collier that's so dynamic when you see it. And, just showing how, these broken color dabs, brush strokes, very similar, but, we get two different takes on it. And this is a Maurice Flammec. And, I've used this painting before, like when I was talking about Monet, one of his friends said, trees are not blue and people are not violet, but you paint them thus because that's the way you honestly feel. In a sense, it's like the ground is not these pinks and reds and blues and greens, but it's like paint what you feel, not what you see. Paint what you feel when you see what you see. And, these Fauvists, these Three Musketeers of Fauvism, it's like, I really feel this energy, this wonderful light where shadows are even brilliant colors. And they did well in articulating that. This is a Flammec. And look how like constructed this is, and rigid in a sense, but there's still this soft, gentle, sensual feel to it that, it's like two violent contrasts that are muted down to provide this, this pretty cool experience. And then a Matisse here on the left, a Fauve painting versus some of his early work. And you can see how, it's much more intense, much more, well, there's just a lot more there. And it's all in harmony. It's louder, but it's not too loud. And I've visited Collier in April. It's a wonderful place to visit, I would say. And but anyway, there was a studio or a gallery in town, and it's a small gallery. And I was quite taken by the work there. The woman that runs it, I forget her name. I could find it if anybody's interested. But anyway, she's got, these paintings all up on the wall in the gallery, and then she's got her desk where she's got the cash register. And then behind the desk, she's got her easel set up, and she's sitting there painting these paintings, cranking them out one after another in acrylics. And I just think, they're simple, they're colorful, and, there's just something really right about them. Bold yet sensitive. They're very Matisse, and I think he would be proud of her work. And she's getting to the essence, that simplicity of Matisse, color and simplicity, and she knows how to do both here. So if you're in Collier, go by her studio. I think you'll enjoy the visit. So let's look at some of the, we'll go iconic work. We'll look at figures, interiors, and still lifes of Matisse. The landscape period was mainly that Fauvist period, and then we're concentrating on these other three genres. So, Woman with the Hat, great painting of Madame Matisse. This is Sailor 1 and Sailor 2. The Green Stripe. So, story here is this is Amelie, his wife. He paints the portrait of her, and it's like green. What's going on there? Well, green and red contrast well, and what is he thinking about? And so the critics would say that, you defaced your wife. How dare you do that? What's your problem here? And so Matisse follows this up, the green stripe on Madame Matisse, and he does his own self-portrait. And notice the green here on his cheeks and up here on his forehead. And all I can say is, I think about Collier, and they talked about there was wonderful colors within the shadows. And, in painting, as far as values go, relative to black and white, green is a gray. And there's nothing to say that, this shadow that he saw upon her face, like we see in the black and white here, that actually there was a green hue to it. And, it's like, well, I want to be true to that. And it's like, if you have a red, a green is gonna show up. And he was just trying to be I don't know. He's making it more interesting than traditionally had the way people made things interesting. And this is a portrait of Margaret, the daughter. And look at this green shade here on top of her hands, a green shade here up on her on top of her head. Lots of green. Green's hard to work with, I find it personally, and Matisse does a wonderful job with it. And this is Two Sisters. I'm here in Denver reporting, and the Denver Museum owns this painting. They bought it in 1950. I assume they still have it in their permanent collection. And this is a painting, simple painting in a sense, but 1950. So, he's 81 years old. And, this looks like a child painted in a sense, and a talented child at that. But I just want to say that youthful energy that Matisse put into his early paintings, 80 years old, he's still doing it. Wonderful. And Matisse and Picasso, we'll talk about him in part 2, but Matisse, he would give Cubism a try every now and then and would do a wonderful job with it. But that was just really not Matisse. But just perhaps to prove if he could do it, and just wanted to find out a curiosity. It's like, what's going on here? This is interesting. I want to learn more. And famous figure paintings, again, this dance painting, which he got him the commission from Shukin, and helped his pocketbook quite a bit. And music. And this is dance, parentheses 1. This is a preliminary work he did. I'm assuming it's as large as the others. And I think the Museum of Modern Art owns this, but anyway, yeah, he did this before the other dance paintings. And for me personally, it's like I love the palette better in dance 1 than I do in the other painting. But it's just, again, it's just one color change, can make such a difference. And Matisse knew how to make that one change and make it right. And here are these paintings. I'm assuming this is Shukin's house, possibly in Russia, but it might be a museum there. And the museum, the paintings were confiscated, during the war, and on. But now they're in the domain. Still lifes. So Matisse, they said he would put flowers next to his paintings that he was working on in his studio, and it can be quite humbling if you try that. Something beautiful made from Mother Nature, and here you are trying to make a painting. It's it's something worthy to live up to. And kind of on the same vein of Renoir, he said he wanted to paint some flowers someday, and he would arrange them meticulously in the vase and get it all set up, and then he would turn the vase around and paint the back side of it. So it's like feel, don't think. And kind of funny stories here. Wonderful Matisse still life. And this is a Gauguin, and I just Gauguin was a master of color, but not near the body of work that Matisse did, not near the diversity of trying this and trying that. But every once in a while you'll see a Gauguin, and the colors will just blow you away. And I want to say, as far as color sensibility goes, Picasso always said that Matisse had it much better than him, but Gauguin would be the closest at times, but not consistently. Very expressive work here. And this would have been done in that Fauves time, no doubt about it. I'm not sure when this was done, but getting back to a little bit more traditional, a little bit softer, not quite as loud. And then here's like a Cubist try, that we showed the figure Cubist try. This is a still life Cubist try. It's a wonderful piece of art. So his interiors, a lot of it's going to be, we're inside looking at a window, but the window at Collier, you'll see this one a lot. And again, that comparison of the actual window versus, Matisse's imagination, feelings. This is the red studio, the Atelier Rouge. And this is Harmony in red. And point out here, so Matisse had been studying 5 years with an artist named Gustave Moreau, who throughout his life until the end, Matisse would give Moreau a lot of credit for teaching him how to paint and being patient with him, etc. And after he'd been with Moreau for 5 years, Moreau said, "Okay, let's do a final exam here in a sense, and let's do a signature painting." And this painting is quite large. I think it's 6 feet wide at least. But it's a masterful piece of work, in sort of a traditional style. Quite a bit of that impressionist indistinctness in it, but it's it borders on the traditional Renaissance era kind of painting. And then 10 years later, this is what we get. This is called Harmony in Red, the dessert. Same setting, the table, a woman at the table, and notice how different the forms are flat. There's all kinds of differences here. But is it effective? And it's like, perhaps I would say much more effective than when he was trying to paint like he was learning to paint. And then here's this Harmony in red in scale. And this is called a pink interior. And then, Matisse said, I said this at the beginning, I believe painting from our elders was not adequate to the true representations of our sensations, so we had to seek new methods. After all, this is urges felt by every generation. He also said all artists bear the imprint of their time, and he talked about, too, the visual habits that of each generation. Just think about it. Back, 1800, there was no car. Maybe you traveled in a train, but most likely not. And today we have television, we have cars, so art is going to reflect that in a sense. And, making the change is not always going to be easy on people's eyes in a sense, much less their spirits. But, that's what we're talking about here with Matisse. It's like Picasso. He knew he had to do something different. Matisse, felt the same way. And several paintings of Matisse's where there's a violin. He would practice the violin for an hour or two every day. I guess he had a pretty diligent work regimen. Artist and his model. Notice the artist the artist here with his palette, the model sitting in the chair, and then the model on the canvas here. And reminds me of what we talked about with Picasso. He painted 50-something renditions of his take on Las Meninas, the 16th century, 17th century painting by Velázquez. And I just thought, Matisse was well aware of this painting. I'm sure he went to Madrid several times during his lifetime. And, I guess I need to look up when Matisse was doing his Las Meninas Picasso was doing his Las Meninas and Matisse was painting this. It's like who came first. They competed that way. So this is, I believe, a view from a window in Morocco. He would travel across the sea there every once in a while and pick up the energy of Morocco. Goldfish, we see goldfish in quite a few of his paintings. Another goldfish painting. And this painting here, it's called the Moroccan Cafe or the Arab Cafe. Some call it the Arab Coffee House, but I think, let's call it Arab Cafe. And, notice how soft this is and how these figures, just melt into the paint, into the surface. And Matisse, he would go into a coffee house in Morocco and he would see these gentlemen, there'd be like a flower on the table. And, these quiet, calm gentlemen would be around the table. And he just could sense that they were just contemplating over this flower and the power of the flower. And then he throws in this goldfish, and there's some flowers down here in a goldfish. And there were birds in the cafe. That was the other thing that I forgot to mention, that there were these singing gentle birds. So just, you know, Monet, I want to paint like a bird singing. It's just this very calm, serene place. And I think the way these colors are put on and the tone and the textures, it just captures that it's like, music, perfect pitch. And then the flowers, the hours contemplating them and goldfish. And the thing that read some comment about goldfish and Matisse, it was like, they're so small, so gentle, so delicate, so so insignificant that no, but there's really this power that's in there. But so, this power of contemplation for hours over a flower. It's just, this painting is so soft and so gentle, but yet so powerful. All right, that's the end of part one. And we'll be back in a little bit with part two. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see if we can keep it going in a little bit. Thank you.